NFL isn't the only playoff that's going on right now. We got a college football playoff going on. We are down to 2 teams. Ohio State, of course, took care of business against Texas on Friday night. Of course, the late strip and score sealed the victory for the Ohio State Buckeyes. On Thursday night, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, thanks to a late field goal, did take care of business against the Penn State Nittany Lions. I'm going to give you the floor. I'm going to say a little choose-your-own adventure. Notre Dame beating Penn State 27-24. Ohio State beating Texas 28-14. Which one are you, Jason Martin, more interested in talking about first?
I mean, both games were dramatic and fun to watch. I was very happy with both in kind of the final, just the final takeaway of watching both those games. They were both worthy semifinals. All 4 teams played really, really hard. You had some dramatic moments and some big-time plays made in both those games. I think that Penn State Notre Dame maybe is where I would start, just because there is something about this Notre Dame team that feels a little bit special. And they seem to – it's not that they're getting all the bounces. It's that they're playing really smart football. Like, they're doing smart things. They're doing clever things, but they seemingly let other teams beat themselves. Like Riley Leonard, I would even say across the board, actually, these 4 quarterbacks, you might not get a collection of like 4 more at this stage in their career in terms of what you're looking at in what they could do in the future, maybe more mediocre guys in a semifinal than these 4 guys. I mean, let's just be honest.
Real quick,
Drew Allar maybe ends up the best of all of them, and he had the worst performance of the 4.
I want to let you keep going, but I was thinking about how crazy it is, and I know college is just a byproduct of any given year. You just never know. Last year it was awesome with Penix and Bo Nix, etc. It is crazy, though, how the NFL is a totally quarterback-driven sport, and college, all of the quarterbacks who are still in this playoff, I don't know how to say it delicately, I wouldn't really trust all that much. I mean, even Will Howard, he's got plenty of weapons, but I don't know that I trust him individually. But go ahead, keep going, J. Mark.
Yeah, I mean, Riley Leonard is like a more athletic version of Daniel Jones, basically, who doesn't throw the ball as well as Daniel Jones does. But Marcus Freeman and the coaching staff, I find that really interesting. But really, I mean, I think it's hard to talk about one without talking about the other, because I felt like 2 big decisions in this game, maybe, or in those 2 games, maybe determine the outcome of both of them. One, let's let Drew Allar throw a pass in the final minute of the game on our side of the field when he hasn't completed a pass to a wide receiver all night. And then on 2nd down from the 2-yard line against Ohio State's defense, let's do a toss sweep to the left and lose 5 yards from a shotgun position off the snap, as opposed to just, I don't know, putting in Arch or doing anything else in that moment. If Arch had been concussed or knocked out earlier, and I have no idea, but like what you did cost you 5-6 yards and then directly led to that now what will be a famous play by Jack Sawyer that Ohio State people will talk about until the end of time. And that play never happens if you don't call that. I got to say, man, it was just a boneheaded choice. Like, those are 2 decisions made by those 2 coaches that they will probably never be able to fully live down, because they were both just complete self-inflicted mistakes.
Somebody was asking me before the show, I forget if it was Ian or Brandon in the back, but somebody was like, what did you make of the Sark thing? And it's like, there's just no good explanation. And I know you're not on social media, but generally when everybody on social media agrees on something, generally they're kind of idiots. I mean, you fill in the blank.
Yeah.
I bring it up because everybody immediately was like, what was that play call? And I think everybody was right. I think it was totally fair to ask. And I think more specifically, it was fair to ask because, as you said, Arch Manning, for whatever reason, you have not decided to bench Quinn Ewers. That's another conversation that, at this point is kind of moot, doesn't even matter. But the one thing that you did establish that you were comfortable doing was putting Arch Manning in on short yardage situations. You're on the goal line. You get the first down because of the pass interference. It's like that, we can get to Allar in a second, but that was one of the most shocking things, one of the most dumb things that obviously set up the strip and score just to play later. But that was, for an otherwise, I think, pretty sharp coach in Steve Sarkisian, that was just stunning. It really
Yeah,
was.
there was no. I mean, sure, okay, he gets in the end zone. What are we saying? We're like, boy, that was risky, but it works. But when it doesn't work, this is the result. Like the risk there. The first thing is, all right. So they've had this stingy goal line defense all year. Had that famous stand against Penn State earlier in the year. Ohio State may stop you if you go 4 times straight at them. Yeah, but I don't think the idea then should be, all right, we're going to take Quinn Ewers and put him in shotgun, and we're then going to do a toss sweep to the left side on the outside, but we have to get 5 yards just to get where we started from. That's
Against
you're
an
not
elite
give
defense
up
with NFL dudes everywhere.
With speed everywhere. Like it defied reason. Like honestly, of the two, that's the more egregious one. I don't like what Penn State did either, but I feel like of the two, the Texas mistake was more massive, to say the least.
I think there's no doubt. And, I mean, I think the Penn State one, I was a little surprised that, listen, I'm not here to criticize other media members because I think everybody, mostly for the most part in our business, works hard and does. If you're calling a college football playoff game, you clearly are qualified to do the job. But, Greg McElroy being well, Drew Allar, I would let him loose because he just doesn't make mistakes. And it's it's kind of what we were saying about Justin Herbert last hour. It's he doesn't make mistakes because his team doesn't really put him in position to make mistakes. And I go back to, you just have to look at the most recent games, even before the semifinal. Boise, 13 of 25 passing, 171 yards. Yeah, he had 3 touchdowns. That's 52% completion percentage. 13 of 22 against SMU. Didn't really matter because SMU gifted Penn State a bunch of points. Even the Oregon game that we remember as this incredible coming out party for the Penn State offense, Drew Allar, 20 of 39, and he did have 3 touchdowns, also had 2 interceptions. I just found it weird that even during the broadcast, it was you would have thought it was Russell Wilson in his prime, just let Drew Allar cook. I'm I don't know. You've been running the ball pretty well all game. Notre Dame was clearly by the end of that game and even coming into the game, I think the more banged up team. I know Abdul Carter was hurt, but I think as a collective team, yes. Notre Dame had 2 offensive linemen out. Riley Leonard in and out of concussion protocol. Love had a big brace on his knee. Listen, I'll say this, Jay Martin, because I want to get it back to you. I thought it was a little aggressive to, here's James Franklin again in a game that didn't matter. I didn't think that was a James Franklin, the worst loss that I've ever seen. I just did not agree with the idea that, just let Drew Allar cook because he's not going to beat you. I'm I don't know. I mean,
earlier in the game, I'll say this. So he tries to throw an interception in the end zone, in the left corner of the end zone. They end up calling that PI, and so it doesn't end up being costly. I'm literally screaming, out loud. I said, what are you doing? Because they were just running the ball, and they were running it down their throat. Outside of Warren, they were just running the ball at Notre Dame, and both Allen and especially Singleton were doing a great job. And I was just why are you throwing the ball for the end zone? And I immediately, before the ball was even, while it was still in the air, I was what are you doing? And then he ends up getting saved by that, and it's just kind of Allar has not been accurate tonight. He hasn't been making great decisions tonight. This Notre Dame defense is just waiting for him to make a mistake because they may have the best secondary in the country, and they're just sitting there waiting for Drew Allar to throw the football to him, and that's exactly what he did. It's just a play you can't make. And to McElroy, this isn't to his defense, but this is what you get sometimes when you have quarterbacks in the booth as analysts, is that they're always going to cede more ground to the idea that the quarterback should be allowed to go make the play. And in this case, McElroy was just flat wrong.
Well, can I
Penn
jump in on
State
that,
had a much better chance to just run the ball and then go to overtime on a short field, and then we'll see whether or not, Riley Leonard's going to cough it up again, because Riley Leonard coughed it up twice in the game. Their defense was still playing very well against Notre Dame. There was no reason to think you couldn't win that thing in overtime. I understand wanting to win it in regulation, but not when you haven't thrown a completion to a wide receiver all night long.
Great call. Yeah,
that's what I'm going to go do. That's going to be the play call at that point in time. I fail to see the logic there.
That's probably the most important point that neither of us had brought up to that point, is you had not completed a pass to a wide receiver at all at that point. Really quickly on that game, do you, we've both been very critical of James Franklin, and listen, he's 1-15 against top 5 teams, and so I think it's largely justifiable. I do think it's kind of weird, I'm still not totally sure if how good Penn State was. Okay, lost to the 3 best teams on the schedule, Oregon, Ohio State, and Notre Dame. Those aren't 3 losses to scoff at. I'm not saying you're a bad team, but SMU gift-wrapped you a victory where you didn't really have to hit 5th gear. You weren't great against Boise, no matter what the final score said. So I don't know how good Penn State was, but I did feel like it was a little aggressive to just pile on James Franklin. It's a college football semifinal. It came down to a play or two. I think that some of the decision-making wasn't great, but I don't know that it's James Franklin's fault that you have the ball back. You have the ball tied with under a minute to go, and your quarterback throws an interception against a really good Notre Dame team. Where'd you stand on just James Franklin as a coach coming out of that game?
I don't feel worse about James Franklin coming out of that. I think the problem that all of us saw was, at that point in the game, that's a game you had every opportunity to then go and win. That's a game that you could have won, and you lost. And you largely lost because you made a bad decision on a play call. If your OC made it, then overrule him because you're the head coach in that situation. So that, I think, is where the critique could be fair. I don't think that this was a terrible performance. I agree with you, and we kind of said that during the season. I don't know how good Penn State is because they only beat the teams they're supposed to beat. But we looked at them in the Big Ten championship game where they put up a ton of points against Oregon, look good, and then unfortunately, and I even said, I was like, I feel bad for James Franklin going into this playoff because no matter what he does in the first 2 games in terms of wins, it's not going to matter because people are just going to blame the opponents and say, all right, well, let's see what happens when they play a real team. And the first quote-unquote real team that they played was Notre Dame, and they found a way to lose close based on what I think could be deemed a questionable decision. I came away feeling a little better about James Franklin than I did at the beginning of the season. But he's still got a lot to prove. There's still a lot that is left out there, and I can understand why any Penn State fan would be frustrated by it. But I can't get, too over my skis when it comes to the James Franklin kind of hatred society or anything like that. I've always been a little bit skeptical of him as a game day coach. I remain a little bit skeptical about him as a game day coach, but I was more impressed with what Penn State pulled off this year as a whole because I didn't think they were going to get this far. And I think that is a credit to the program, and I do think they're going to put money into NIL, and they do need to get Allar some weapons. They need to get him some better wide receivers, some more guys, so he doesn't have to throw it to Tyler Warren or hand the football off every time. And I think that Allar proved, this is the other point, we haven't made it yet, but we both suggested it to each other as that game was going on. We don't need to have Drew Allar to the NFL conversations yet. We can back that off. No one needs to have that. Don't write the articles. Don't talk about it. I don't care what his potential. He's got a long way to go. There's still a lot that there's some maturation that needs to take place. There's some decision-making, some accuracy. There's stuff that he needs. There's no reason to rush this. I understand. You look at his size. You look at his ability to throw the football, all that. Don't get enamored with that yet. Let's not have Anthony Richardson 2.0 or the next, Trey Lance or whatever it is that hasn't played a whole lot of football, but the potential's there, so we got to go do this. No, you really don't. Let's give this some time.
Especially in the NIL era, I have no doubt that Drew Allar. Listen, if the NIL era has proven anything, there is clearly a market for quarterbacks after what happened with Carson Beck on earlier this week, where there were reports he's going to get upwards of $4 million to go to Miami. Who knows what's the truth? But Drew Allar will be making very nice money by returning to Penn State.